good information in here for us that will help guide your final preparations leading into London and then, of course, in London. So I'm going to just get straight through to the outline for the session tonight, and then we'll get straight into the speakers. So, Peter, if you could just go to the outline for me. So as you can see from the information that I sent out in terms of who we have tonight, we've got some really reputable people that have given up their time, and I know that you're also very thankful, like myself, to them to do this. But it's really key information that I thought was quite relevant as we lead into London. And as you can see, we have a number of people from our board, which is fantastic. Chad from V Insurance, so he will answer all our insurance questions. And of course, Kieran Barry, who's one of our National Talent Academy coaches and will offer a wealth of information in terms of preparation. So thank you for being along. I'm now going to hand over to Peter Downs, who's our facilitator for this evening, and Peter will walk you through the webinar and how it all works. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Katie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Downs, and my job's pretty easy this evening. I just have to press the right buttons, make sure we're on time, and to facilitate this webinar through to its conclusion. I think we'll go till about 9 o'clock-ish, I think, as well. Now, one thing we want to do is to encourage you as much as possible to ask questions live in this webinar. We'll have a question and answer session right at the end. It's pretty simple to ask a question on a webinar if it's the first time. You should have a control panel on your screen, and there's a questions box there. Simply type in the questions and press the send button. That will come to myself and Katie there. So just press your questions, put your questions in there, press the send button, and at the end of the webinar, we'll certainly be addressing those. If we don't get a chance to address all your questions, then we will do post the webinar anyway. So we will receive your questions. So if we don't get the time this evening for your questions, we will get to it though post the webinar. So please do send them in. We did have some questions come in before the webinar as well. So that's good. Okay, without further ado, our first speaker, I'll introduce Mr. Kieran Barry. Let me just unmute Kieran for you so we can you hear me, Kieran?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Peter.
Excellent. Well, I'll press the buttons this end, Kieran, if you want to take it from here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. Well, first of all, welcome to everyone, and congratulations on being selected for the Australian team. It's a big honour, as you all know, and I'm sure you've worked incredibly hard to get there, and I hope you have a great experience and a great race in London. A little bit tough to sort of give you guys guidelines because I know some of you are incredibly experienced and others are a bit less experienced, but what I'm going to try and do is just give you some general outlines of the way you should be preparing for the race, just based on my experience of travelling to Europe for a lot of years for races. So realistically, if it's a bit too basic for you, I apologise for that, because I know all you guys are obviously very good athletes, having made it to the national team, but hopefully we cover everything, and if there's any more detail you need, feel free to ask a question and we'll hopefully get to that at the end. Okay, Peter, can we go to the next slide, or the first slide? Because I'm sick of looking at myself. A bit scary, that picture. Okay, so tapering, as I said, you've all tapered for races, you're all experienced with it, and you all should have your own taper routine that you pretty much follow. General rule of thumb is, as it said there, about 50% of normal volume. Intensity, keep that the same, and the frequency of your training should be kept the same as well. So basically what you're looking to do in that last week is shorter efforts with longer recovery periods, so that you're doing some fast work without overexerting. Okay, now the complexity that comes into tapering for an international race is much greater, because extended travel and the time changes, they're going to place really big demands on your body, and if you haven't done it before, you are definitely going to notice a difference. You've got to allow yourself extra time on the run in to taper, to wind down your training, and you're going to have to allow yourself extra time on the way once you get there to get back to your best. So what that means, obviously some of you are leaving early, some of you are leaving late, so that makes, you know, it pretty difficult to give exact guidelines. But think of it this way: if you travel in a fatigue state, right, you're going to significantly extend the time it takes you to recover. Travel like this puts massive stress on the immune system. So if you travel fatigued, your immune system's depressed further, your risk of picking up something on the plane is significantly increased, and your risk of getting something when you get there, because your immune system's going to be really depressed for a few days, goes up greatly as well. And so it's really important that you err on the side of caution in the final 3 days. Okay, so those final 3 days, my recommendation would be don't do anything intense. Now, you should have done all that stuff before. I mean, if you're going to race well in London, the last 3 days before you go shouldn't really matter. One session, hard session here or there, isn't going to make a big difference on a positive note, but it could make a massive difference on a negative note. Okay? When you are the last day before you go, if it's possible, it's always good to do a really light session. I normally try and get our athletes to just have a light swim before they go, if that's possible. Okay, and it will just help you feel more relaxed on the flight. Whereas conversely, if you do a hard session, you're just going to be sore on the flight. So, as I said, just take it easy. And a big rule of thumb: if you're feeling flat in that last week before you go, back it off even more than you would in your normal taper. Okay. All right, Peter, can I have the next slide, please? Peter's probably fallen asleep.
No, yeah, it just takes a little time there.
Yeah, sorry, mate. All right. I think it's important. Okay, so when you're traveling to Europe, think about, you know, what you're putting your body through, and think about the fatigue level you're going to face. Okay, so the last 2 nights before you go, what most of us tend to do is try and get as much work done as humanly possible, because we're taking a break from work, so we tend to work, most age groupers in my experience will tend to work about 18 hours a day in those last 2 days, which is the biggest mistake you can make. You want to get a couple of good nights sleep. Okay, with your food, follow your normal eating pattern, but remember, because you're cutting down in training, you don't want to be eating too much. Okay, so back that off a little bit. Right? On your way to the airport, make sure that you have a good drink on the way there, and hold on 1 second. Make sure you have a good drink on the way there, but remember, you have to have your water bottle finished, because they won't let you get it through customs. Okay. Once you're at the airport, try not to sit for too long. It's not a great idea to sit for a long time when you're going to get on a plane for a long time. Now, a flight bag is really important. Okay, so obviously you've got your empty water bottle, and then in your toiletries, your normal toiletries, deodorant, etc. You don't want to stink all the other people off the plane, but think about the dehydration factor. So lip balm, moisturizer, eye drops, 3 critically important things. The next, equally important, are good quality earplugs. You're going to Europe, don't save $2 on buying cheap and nasty earplugs. Get the best ones you can before you go. A good eye mask and a neck pillow. If you're lucky enough to be in business class or first class, well, I hate you, but apart from that, you probably don't need them. But anyone who's traveling up the back of the bus, neck pillows are really important. And the other really critical thing is compression socks. Okay, not tights, because you want your ankles to be looked after as well. Okay. Once you're on the plane, adjust your watch to European time, not Singapore time or wherever it is you're stopping over. Adjust it to European time. Be aware of what the time is for your stopover, but more important, European time. You want to start thinking in that mindset instantly. Okay, you're 8 hours back from when you actually get on. Get an aisle seat so you can get up and move around as much as you can. Right. And make sure you, because I want you drinking a lot, make sure you're going to be going to the toilet a lot, so walk a little extra, and spend some time stretching. Okay. The other thing you should have in your carry-on bag is some snacks that you like, because you want to eat frequently, and you don't want to be forced to eat the airline food that you, in all likelihood, are probably going to hate. But you want to eat things that you like. You don't want to eat too much at once. You just want to eat lightly and regularly. Okay. Now, depending on what time of day you're flying, make sure you're careful with your food choices. Protein, so we all know, meat, nuts, all those sort of things. Chicken, fish, they're all going to help you stay awake. Carbs, pastas, for example, are going to help you sleep. Okay. Drink regularly. All right, so you want to make sure that every time you go to the bathroom, check your urine color. If it's getting darker, drink more. Okay. Now, I've based this on the next point, stay awake on the first flight, for those people who are leaving in the afternoon, which tends to be the majority of flights from Australia. Okay, you're going to be leaving in the afternoon, you're going to get tired, you're going to want to sleep. Don't. Okay, remember, it's 8 hours earlier where you're headed. So you really want to make sure that first bit you stay awake, because that's the first step in getting used to the time. Okay, next one, please. I'll keep going while we're waiting. But once you if you've got to stop over in Asia, once again, I'm making that assumption. Okay, if you've got specific questions about other flights, just send them to me at the end. All right. With your Asian layer, avoid caffeine, because you should be planning to sleep on the next flight. Keep drinking water. Now, if you go to Singapore, Changi Airport has a really good pool and gym. If you can get a swim in, it would be the best thing in the world. It doesn't have to be hard. It's a small pool, but just a few laps is going to make you feel significantly better. Okay. Once you're on the next flight, keep your fluid intake up. Okay. But then about 90 minutes before you plan to sleep, cut it back. And I can't spell minutes, I've just read. But about 90 minutes before you plan to sleep, drop the water back, because you want to go to sleep hydrated but with an empty bladder, so you get a full night's sleep, or as close to as possible. Okay. And so for this one, take the carbohydrate off option. Okay. Ideally, assuming, as I said, you've taken the afternoon flight from Sydney, eat, read, watch a movie, good night. All right. Make sure you put your earplugs in and your eye mask. You want the quality of sleep you get when it's dark is significantly greater than when it's light. When you wake up, protein option. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Once you get to London, if you arrive in the morning, it's really important that you stay awake. As soon as you can get off the plane, if you can get some light exercise done, that's fantastic, and start eating your meals at London times. Okay. Get outdoors, as I said, good luck trying to get some sunlight in London. You never know, you could be lucky, but the more you can get your body into that time zone, the better. Sunlight plays a critical factor in that. Okay? You want to try and get out of the sun, like the light, once it's hitting sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and you've still got a bit of daylight left in London at that time, but just head indoors then, okay, and start to wind down, getting your body ready to sleep at that stage. Remember, you're going to be really tired during that first day, but don't worry about it, just put up with it. Okay. The most critical thing though is when you get there, sometimes you'll feel fantastic. Don't let that fool you. It's going to take you a few days to get back to yourself, to your best. So listen to your body over that first few days, and just give yourself 3 days of aerobic training just to get back into it. Okay, Go and head over the course, have a good look at the course, get an idea of it, but just don't push yourself in training. Just let your body get back to its best. It will, but it will take a bit of time. Okay, the final point on equipment is about equipment selection. Now, the first point there, I've seen a lot of people at Worlds and Olympics and things like that who've tried new things because we all want that edge for the big race. I've never heard of anyone having success with it. Okay, I've seen some incredible disasters from people trying new things. That's not the time to do it. Okay? The best advice I can give you is just to do what you do at home. Okay, the course in London, in terms of wheels, the sprint course I don't think suits a disc. There's quite a lot of turns where you're going to have to accelerate the wheel back up. So unless you're really strong, you're really used to it, I'd probably go with a deep rim as an alternative. Remember, critically important for London, it's probably going to be wet. Okay, so don't make the mistake that some of our athletes made in London and put slicks on. That extra 5 seconds can be the difference between not finishing your race or finishing it 5 seconds later is a much better option. Okay, look, I know that's a very quick summary and there'll probably be plenty of questions, but I'm more than happy to answer those at the end or after the webinar. Okay, thank you, and over to you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Kieran. Very good, very good. We'll move straight on. There'll be chances for questions right at the end, so please do keep your questions coming in. Jackie, let me just unmute you. Jackie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks very much, Peter. Welcome, everybody. Can I first say, just before I get underway, congratulations on making the World Age Group team in whichever race you're competing in. I have done one World Championship myself, and it is loads of fun if you've never done it before, and I can imagine it's even more exciting if you're going back again or defending a title. So I have been I'm a very ranked back of the packer that's been out there playing on the field of play for 29 years as a triathlete and 22 years as a technical official. So I just want to touch on a couple of things. If I can have the next slide, please, Peter. And Katie has very kindly given me a few prompters here. I think the sorts of questions that have been coming in the months leading up to London. And I think of all of the areas in your preparation or how you behave at the event, I personally believe, as I said, and having worked both sides of the fence, that this is the one area where you have the greatest control over the outcome. If you obey the rules, you won't have any issues. It's really sort of quite that simple. So I'm going to run through a couple of things. I mean, how do I best prepare for the World Championships? My recommendation to that is to download the ITU competition rules. There's 46 pages, and I think you've got about 15 hours on the plane. Some very worthwhile reading. For those of you privileged enough to have sponsors needing to be added to your uniform, there are guidelines in the rules as well for that, and I would imagine that you've already accessed those or contacted Katie with any questions on that area. In terms of do they really check my bike tri-suit and helmet and everything, there will be, what I can honestly say is that there will be a full complement of officials. For anyone that was at Gold Coast in 2009, we had 54 officials, and I can't imagine London would have any less. How they specifically check everything, whether they check every single person or check select individuals or check with team managers, I can't answer that question. Again, I think if you've complied by the rules, you absolutely have nothing to worry about. How strictly will the drafting rule be implemented compared to your events in Australia? I think, again, it's extremely simple, at least it is for me with my simple mind, and that is those two magic words, World Championships. So my expectation of what will happen over there, of course, depending on conditions and safety, is that the officials would apply the rules to the highest level, as I said, dependent upon conditions and what's happening on the field of play. Okay, we'll touch on a couple of the different rules and everything in a minute, and as I said, the rules can be found on the ITU website, www.triathlon.org. That will come up on a later slide, and a very worthwhile, fairly dry but worthwhile read. If I could have the next slide, Peter. There we go. So there we go. There's the website. So when you go to it, it's always fun to find it if you've never been to this particular section. So when you go to the website, click on the documents section. In the documents section, that little box off to the right, when you click on the rules, will come up with all of those documents as well. Now, the competition rules also include the uniform rules, so you don't have to download multiple documents. And what I've just highlighted in the box below at the bottom of this slide is when I click on competition rules, there's actually 3 documents. They've now removed the old 2012 rules. And what you'll find is the complete rules, all 137 pages, and the rule changes from 2012 to 2013, which I think may be more relevant to those that have gone to a World Championship before. Next slide. So what I wanted to just touch on is a couple of things that are specifically different with the ITU competition rules. The water temperature cutoff for wetsuits is different. It's 22 for age groupers, whereas of course in Australia it's 24. I think it's going to be freeze your butt off weather in London anyway, so I'm sure you'll all be wearing wetsuits. You'll find those, and there are time limits for the swim. For example, in the Olympic distance, the maximum time allowed in the water is 1 hour and 10 minutes. And this is obviously to ensure that the event finishes in a timely fashion. But I can't imagine that anybody hopefully has too many worries with that. But you'll find all of those details on page 17 of the rules. A couple of little things that I've combined, which you'll find on page 19. So the swim cap that you'll be provided. So any of the gear that you're given, please use it. I don't know that I've heard of too many Australians ever being penalised at a world, so I'm sure you don't want to be the first. Tri-suits, and again, I know you've got your Australian uniforms, but just so you know that they can't have any neoprene sections in them, and if for some reason you wear 2, if you weren't wearing a wetsuit for whatever reason, they both have to fully comply. So when you peel one off, it looks exactly the same. Wetsuits must fit the body tightly. So some of those rocket science sport wetsuits with the flaps and things like that on them are not allowed in ITU events, and actually, or in Triathlon Australia events anymore either. Next slide, Pete. In terms of the bike, it's really quite simple. And again, rather than spending all night on this, we've all only got a small amount of time for our sections. UCI time trial rules apply for non-drafting bike specifications. You'll find them on page 22. I would suggest you would familiarise yourself with that if you are particularly lucky to have extremely nice cycling gear. Probably the biggest difference you'll notice though is the draft zone, and anybody doing long course will be used to 12 metres. For those mainly doing Olympic distance, 12 metres, it's about the size of a minibus, or you can pretty much put 2 full-size sedans end to end. So it is very, very large. You've got 20 seconds to pass through that zone, and you've got 5 seconds to drop back. So if somebody passes you and drops in front of you, which is always annoying, you have 5 seconds to drop out of that zone. And bear that in mind, that 12 metres is a long way to drop out, and 5 seconds is not a very long time to get out of that. A couple of, in terms of the new rules brought in, particularly in 2013, where the wetsuit and the tri-suit changes in terms of the neoprenes and the neoprene and flaps on wetsuits. And the other thing that I noticed in the change document that I thought may be relevant if by chance you're racking your bike by the handlebars, they now must be racked by both handlebars if you're forward racking. And again, I'm not sure. I know Murray's going to give you a great brief of the course and some of the details after being at the Olympics last year, so he may have some insight on that. And as I said, please, this is where you can download the rules. Next slide. That was just a summary of a couple of the points that we've been through. If anybody has any questions, I know Katie's compiling those. And I believe that should be it for me, Peter.
Yep. Yeah. What we're going to do, Jackie, there. I might unmute Katie right now.
Yes.
So, Katie, do you want to unmute yourself there? Let me just try. There you go.
Yeah,
Katie, if we've got some questions coming in, I believe we do. Katie.
Yeah, we do. Jackie, thank you for that. We've just got some really good questions that have come through. The first one is, are SMP bike saddles ITU legal?
Look, I'm not familiar with that specific seat. Again, if somebody does have particularly sophisticated gear, I would be going to the UCI UCI website and checking the compliance. Again, the bike needs to be time trial legal under UCI specifications, so I would go and have a look.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not a bike expert, I'm afraid.
Sorry, thanks, Jackie. The next one is there any basis that a bike will be quarantined coming back into Australia?
Not as far as I know. I've certainly travelled with my bike all around the world. Maybe don't go off-roading through a farm with lots of cow poo, but not as far as I know. If the conditions in London are particularly grubby and grimy, I would just wipe the bike down. But certainly I've travelled to many countries with my bike and I've never had a problem with it being quarantined.
Yep. Can you wear 2 swim caps?
If you wear 2 swim caps, your second swim cap must be underneath the competition swim cap. So the competition swim cap must be on the outside. So yeah, if you're worried about being cold, then your personal swim cap must be underneath the competition swim cap.
Okay, another couple of questions, Jackie. Are compression socks able to be worn?
Let me look at the clothing guidelines on that.
While you're looking at that,